Hi. So the topic I want to address today is ESG being politicized? Now, on the face of it, it looks quite obvious that ESG is being politicized. It looks like a crazy question. We've been seeing headlines like these for the last few years now. Dan Patrick declares war on green Wall Street investors. The Republican Party directs culture war fury towards green investing trend. Kentucky warns JP Morgan, BlackRock, Citi of divestment for boycotting energy companies. BlackRock, Vanguard splash on lobbyists as ESG battles rage ahead of US election. And my favorite from the last couple of weeks, ESG is coming for your candy bars. In one sense, it certainly looks like ESG is being politicized. When we say that ESG is being politicized in this sense, what we're saying is something like this. Here is a perfectly good tool for improving investment analysis, one that could help improve risk-adjusted returns, one that also attracts values investors. Why is this controversial? Why are politicians now talking about this? They're turning ESG into something that it isn't. Now, if this is all that we mean by politicization, then yes, I agree, ESG is being politicized. Integrating ESG factors into investment has become really complicated in the US because of this politicization. And there are early but clear signs that ESG investing is going to get a lot more complicated here in Europe too. And this is why it's so important to characterize correctly precisely what is going on here. What I will argue today is that in a deeper sense, ESG is not being politicized. I will argue that on the contrary, it is entirely normal that politicians and other stakeholders should be talking about ESG investing in a political way. And that is because, in an important sense, ESG is political. It has always been political. ESG is political because it involves the use of power. To make my argument, I will need to draw upon some political philosophy, specifically the philosophy about political power. I will then talk through the implications of my view for your choices as asset managers. So let's begin with the political philosophy. Can political philosophy shed some light on the challenges you're now being faced with as asset managers pursuing ESG? Well, it depends on what you think political philosophy is all about. Now, I'm going to take you through two competing views. The first view, the traditional view, goes roughly like this. Here is a political community. It may not look like a political community. If you look closely, you'll see people sitting together picnicking. Being members of a community means we share something significant in common. If the community is a nation, we share a piece of territory, a history, institutions, perhaps a language. These are things that form part of our identity. Now, for all that we share, we're also very different from one another. We value different things. We have different interests. That's just the way it is. It's inescapable. Look at the people again. They appear to be congregating for some common purpose. They've made space for each other, and they're respecting that. What makes a community not just a community, but a political community is that we are, in a sense, living together. We're trying to accomplish things together. So now our differences become significant. Given our differences and the potential for conflict, how do we accomplish the task of living together? If only there was someone we could call upon to bring order and create the conditions for cooperation despite our differences. Someone with superpowers. Someone like the state. The state has a superpower. The state has a monopoly over the force that can be used within the state's territory. This monopoly of force means the state can introduce and enforce laws and directives designed to bring about cooperation in the pursuit of society's goals. But the state has to do this in a way that is acceptable. It cannot simply dominate. domination is not politics. A political solution to the need for cooperation is one that meets some standards of legitimacy, standards like having representative, just institutions. When the state solves the problem of cooperation in a way that is legitimate, then we say it has political authority. Having political authority is what entitles the state to use its power over others. So far, so good. But now the state has to actually do stuff. While it has got the authority of the people, it has to maintain that authority by acting in ways that are legitimate. Roughly speaking, this means by bringing about just outcomes in just ways. Now, if we look at politics through this view of political philosophy, the link to asset management is simply this. The state is entitled to issue laws, regulations, decrees to bring about order and the conditions for cooperation. The rules of the game, if you like. Subjects obey the laws, and you, asset managers, are subjects. So you're fine if you just follow the rules of the game. And if you want to have more freedom of action, you simply lobby for it. Let's give this first view of political philosophy a name. Let's call it the state-centric view of political philosophy, because it assumes the problems we're trying to solve are those to do with states. And what it has to say has been formulated with states in mind. If we are not talking about the state, then on this view, we're not talking about politics at all. Now, I want to talk about a second view of political philosophy, one that I want to argue for. Let's begin by going back to the state. So the relationship between the political community and the state, and the need for authority and sustaining legitimacy, on the view that I will argue for, all this remains true. It still plays a central role. But let's focus on the state for a moment. The political community's significance here is simply that it licenses the state to do something for it. Strip away the political community, and you're left with simply an entity, the state, that has power. Sure, the state has a very particular superpower, but it is just a power holder. And this is where this view goes in a different direction. If the reason political philosophy is interested in the state is that it holds power, let's just talk about power and the license for using power and its legitimation, and say the state is just an important example of that. The fact is, there are other power holders, and these too need some kind of authority to use their power over others. And that authority needs to be sustained by using power legitimately. Let's give this second view of political philosophy a name. Let's call it the power-centric view of political philosophy. It has all the substance of the state-centric view, but without any of the stately packaging. Well, great. What has this got to do with ESG? Well, first, we need to put you back in the picture on this second view. Here's you. This is a still from the Warner Brothers film Justice League. Batman, here as Bruce Wayne, has just recruited the boy, the Flash, to the Justice League. The Flash screws up his face and asks Bruce Wayne, "So what is your superpower?" Bruce Wayne looks at the Flash and replies, "I'm an asset manager, and I have $11.58 trillion of assets under management." That's not what he really says. What he really says is something like, "I'm rich." This is where you fit into political philosophy on this second view. Asset managers and asset owners have power that affects other people. Your decisions impose outcomes on others. You make trade-offs between different people's interests. You simply cannot do asset management without using your power and having these impacts. Now, being rich doesn't give you the right to use your power in ways that have these impacts on other people. And you also don't have the superpower that the state has, the monopoly of force within the territory. Instead, your political authority is derived from the state where you are domiciled and the states in which you operate. The state licenses you to use your power for the purposes that businesses exist for. You now have political authority to use your power, but you still have to sustain your legitimacy for it. Broadly speaking, this means you have to bring about just outcomes in a just way. This is what I mean when I say that ESG is political. But so what? What does that mean for you as asset managers? I like to talk about the big bucks choices, the big high-level choices that business leaders have given certain realities. In other words, making these choices is why you get paid the big bucks. As asset managers, I think you have three options. The first two options come down to trying to avoid politics altogether. The first option is that you choose to dominate. You choose not to make your power political. You simply force everyone to just accept what you do. But force is not your superpower. So instead, domination could be through manipulation, through the manufacturing of consent. And then there's silence. Bankers bury ESG in pitch books to head off Republican attacks. Canadian investors stand by ESG despite green hushing trend. JP Morgan changes DEI to DOI as companies respond to Trump assault on equity. While silence, such as by green hushing, looks like a display of submission, of weakness, it can also constitute domination. By going silent on ESG, assuming you're being successful at it, you keep on using your power the way you want to, but you take away the opportunity to have that exercise of power contested. But if this is going to work, you have to dominate successfully. I don't know how feasible it is to pursue domination over a long period, and in general, I think it is clear from recent headlines that domination is not succeeding as a strategy. Holding managers accountable, $1.5 trillion asset owner coalition sets out new guideline on stewardship alignment. Asset managers are blocking ESG progress, Share Action says. Top UK pension fund pulls £28 billion from State Street over ESG retreat. BlackRock, Vanguard and State Street are the real power behind Big Oil's climate retreat, report finds. New York pension funds put asset managers on notice over climate plans. So what is the next option? Several fund managers have launched initiatives designed to cede power to their clients, thereby removing some of the political heat entirely. First, there is voting choice. So all the big three index tracking firms and at least one European asset management firm have launched services to give their clients the opportunity to determine which way the votes cast on their behalf should be voted. This is the fund manager ceding power. Then there is the more recent move by BlackRock to set out a voting policy on climate change resolutions, which its clients can elect to adopt in the investment mandate. So for those mandates that adopt the policy, BlackRock will vote according to this policy, regardless of what it is voting in relation to other mandates, its other mandates. It's a concerted strategy to get asset owners to step up into this political arena. Now, these are interesting moves, and though I've seen some attempt at pushback from those on the political right, this does not yet appear to have amounted to much. But the problem is there is a limit to how much power asset managers can give up. And this brings us to the third choice. Legitimate the power you retain. But how? For several decades, it seemed to be the case that investment returns are the only legitimation story an asset manager ever needs. But one result of all that contestation we've seen over recent decades is that shareholder primacy has come under attack. So this is the Business Roundtable's revised statement on the purpose of the corporation that they released in 2019. Departing from their previous position, the Business Roundtable set out the view that the purpose of a corporation is to bring value to all stakeholders, not just shareholders and not even primarily shareholders. I am not sure that maximizing risk-adjusted returns as a legitimation strategy is going to be able to survive this sustained attack on shareholder primacy, or the recent attacks on ESG investing from the right, even where it is maximizing returns. So how do you set about legitimating your power as asset managers? You need to use your power in ways that are in fact legitimate, in the knowledge that for the majority of stakeholders, these will also be seen to be legitimate. And that means using your powers in ways that demonstrate transparency, accountability, and inclusivity, and achieving outcomes that respect human rights, that achieve justice, and achieve sustainability. Now, this will be familiar terrain to you. The finance community has long found ways to legitimate its power. Here you got, in 2003, the Equator Principles that were released to set standards, social and environmental standards in relation to project finance. And then, of course, in 2005, you got the Principles for Responsible Investment, making commitments, signatories making commitments to responsible investment practices. These are legitimation strategies. On the view that I have been arguing for, the reason that ESG is political is that investment is political. And this puts asset managers in a tight spot. Firstly, because you have power, no matter what you do, it is going to be political. If you do ESG, that has political implications. If you choose to step back from ESG, that step has political implications. If you go silent, that too has political implications. Secondly, whatever you decide, you will alienate someone. Whoever you choose to include, you necessarily exclude someone else. Because this is all about power, if you concede to demands to step back from ESG, you risk being seen as weak, and they will come back for more concessions. You really are between a rock and a hard place. My final thought, then, is that politics is inescapable. As managers have already discovered, politics is also hard. If you're interested in continuing to look at asset management and the companies you invest in through a political lens, you may be interested in the Substack I've launched on political leadership in business. This is the QR code. Thank you very much for listening.